Some slightly disappointing news here, people. The Daniel Dubois Erik Pfeiffer fight is off. And Daniel Dubois now has a replacement opponent who's from Holland called Ricardo. I'm not sure how to pronounce his surname. Is it Sneeders? I'm not sure. You guys tell me in the comment section. But the reason that the Pfeiffer fight is not happening, and I think that was a much better fight on paper, the reason it's not happening is unclear. It's shrouded in mystery because ostensibly Team Dubois, Frank Warren, etc. seem to be insinuating that there was an issue with Erik Pfeiffer's medical. And that's the reason that fight with him couldn't go ahead. But Pfeiffer's people are furious and they're saying there was no issue with his medical. And they believe that, they changed the opponent because they were frightened of Dubois actually losing to Pfeiffer. So I'll get you some quotes here. This is from Frank Warren. He said, quote, "Of course, it's a disappointment that we have had to make a late change, but the most important thing was getting Daniel a solid test." And in fact, I've got to interject already because this guy who they've got for Daniel Dubois, at least on paper and from what I've seen of him in the ring, and I have watched one of his fights now, he doesn't look like a solid test. Okay, but anyway, to continue the quote, Frank Warren said, "But the most important thing was getting Daniel a solid test. We've had Sneeders, whatever he's called, training for weeks, getting ready for this fight on the off chance there was an issue. And thank God we did. Pfeiffer's team didn't submit his MRI on time. And given the current circumstances, we couldn't stand for the uncertainty or take the risk that the fight would be pulled at the last minute. Daniel hasn't boxed since last December, some 8 months ago. That's a long time, especially for Daniel, who has always been active. Daniel trained at home with his sister and younger brother during the lockdown, and he has been back in the gym with his trainer Martin Bowers for several weeks. Joe got an impressive win last month, so this is Daniel's chance to show what he's made of. Of course, my nerves will be on edge a bit next week. They were until Joe came through against Michael Wallish, and until Daniel's arm is raised after the Sneeders fight, it will be the same. Sneeders fancies the fight and was happy to say yes and jump at the opportunity of his career. He's coming up from cruiserweight and wants to follow in the footsteps of fighters like Usyk and Bellew. And I think that's all Frank Warren had to say. So we'll end the quote there. He says, provided Daniel can solve this Dutch puzzle, we can push on with the Joyce fight. Then we can hope for a world title fight next year as a mandatory contender. Right, end quote. So those are the words of Frank Warren. Now, I've got to take some issue with some of the things he said there, saying that this is insinuating this is a real tough test for Daniel. I've looked at this guy and he doesn't look like a tough test at all. He's 18-0 with 8 KOs, mainly at cruiserweight, and all but one of his fights has been in the Netherlands. The Netherlands is not exactly known for having too many great boxers, particularly heavyweight boxers. And as you see, the one fight he had outside of the Netherlands was in Belgium, and he lost that on a 12-round unanimous decision. And that is actually the fight that I saw. He was down in the 10th round of that fight. So I'm not saying he's a complete tomato can, but when you look at him fight, when you look at who he's fought, he shouldn't pose too many issues for Daniel Dubois at all. And this is a far less interesting fight than the Erik Pfeiffer fight. The Erik Pfeiffer fight was way more interesting than this. Now, heading over to this article here, you've got the promoter of Erik Pfeiffer, Errol Seelan. And I'm going to quote him here. He says, "These guys are not to be respected. They claim there was an issue with paperwork. That's BS. We submitted all medical documents in time, but never heard back from anyone from Warren's team. We asked for the contract, never heard back for days from anyone. Now Erik's training camp is completely wasted because of these bleep." I'm not exactly sure what he means by this particular word here, but I'm just going to say bleep. Goes on to say, "In the beginning, we arranged for both fights." And he's saying this, if I can interject, he was saying this because I believe he also promotes the guy who recently fought Joe Joyce. So he said, "In the beginning, we arranged for both fights. I was more unsure that the Wallish fight would happen. We didn't have all his paperwork and he wasn't in the best shape, taking the fight on short notice. They said everything was fine because they knew he wasn't going to beat Joe Joyce. But we were confident that Erik was going to beat Dubois. He is in the best shape of his career. He's still sparring. We didn't know how to tell him there is no fight. They knew he was going to beat Dubois and ruin their plans for a fight between Dubois and Joe Joyce. That's why they never answered when I kept calling and texting them. They are scared and they are all bleep. All right. Goes on to say, they are all untrustworthy. Frank Warren, his sons, all of them. I will never again do business with these people. Everything will need to be signed in writing. I am a man of my word. I make deals and work hard to carry my reputation as a man of respect. These people are bleep. They are not to be trusted. And next time I see them, they will feel it. End quote. So there you have it from the promoter of Erik Pfeiffer. A very different story to what Frank Warren's saying. Who's in the right? Who's in the wrong? I have no idea. What I do know is that boxing is a shady business. It's full of people who don't keep their word. It's full of people who do all kinds of snidey things. So as far as I'm concerned, it could be either of them who's not telling the truth and who's leading the public astray. Maybe it's both of them. I don't know. Let me know what you guys think in the comment section below. Bottom line for me is the Erik Pfeiffer fight was way more interesting than this guy. Snyders or Sniders, however you pronounce his name. Erik Pfeiffer's a real heavyweight. Erik Pfeiffer is also unbeaten. Erik Pfeiffer can punch a bit. He had a solid amateur background. In fact, at senior level, he had a much more extensive amateur background than Daniel Dubois had. Achieved far more. So he'd be coming with a certain level of ambition, a certain level of physicality, because he's a pretty big guy. I think he was like, 6'4", 6'5", around the same height as Daniel Dubois. Not as heavy in weight, I don't think. A little bit lighter, but not too much. So that, to me, was interesting. This fight here is just a run out against Erik Snyders or Sniders, however you say his name. It's just a little run out against a blown-up cruiserweight who wasn't a great cruiserweight. I mean, he spent his whole career in the Netherlands. If he was ever going to do anything, if he was ever any good, I mean, to be fair, maybe he was tied to a promoter that, wasn't really going to get him the best of opportunities. So I don't want to completely write him off as no good, but I have actually watched him box and yeah, he looks very run-of-the-mill. He looks like a very run-of-the-mill cruiserweight. And if you're a run-of-the-mill cruiserweight stepping up to heavyweight against guys who really hit very hard, like Daniel Dubois, there's not much hope for you. The only thing I can say for him is, because he's a cruiserweight and he's had to make that weight, he's likely to be in good shape. He has fought at heavyweight before. In his last fight, he was 213 pounds. So if he comes in around that kind of weight, maybe he can be mobile for a bit. Maybe he can mess Daniel Dubois around a little. But even at cruiserweight, he only had 8 KOs. And I'm the first to tell you that knockout ratios are not always indicative of, or they don't always tell the full story about how hard somebody can hit. But generally speaking, they do give you some indication about whether a guy's a puncher or not. Generally speaking, there are some exceptions, okay? And the guy only had 8 knockouts at cruiserweight against very, very limited opposition. I mean, look at the records of the guys he's been fighting. This guy had 7 wins, 13 losses. A guy who he lost to was 15-2, 15-2-1. Fought a guy with 5 fights there, 12-14. In 2018, he fought a guy who had 9 wins and 26 losses. He's fighting some very inexperienced guys here, 6-0 guy. A guy with 9-6, 24 with 17. I mean, his opposition has been terrible. And even with that terrible opposition, he's only got 8 knockouts. And some of these fights, as you can see, he's had 10-rounders, 8-rounders. I mean, several 10-rounders here. Look at this. 10-rounder, 10-rounder, 10-rounder. 12-rounder, 8-rounder here. So, to be fair, actually, in retrospect, looking back on his resume, most of those points decisions were early on in his career where he was only going 6 or 8 rounds. So, maybe I need to retract what I said previously about his punching power at cruiserweight, because obviously if you're in a 12-rounder, you've got more rounds to get the job done in terms of stopping your opponent. Whereas if you're only going 6 rounds or 8 rounds, you're limited in terms of being able to stop him, right? But either way, even if he only had 8 or 10 rounds, these are poor opponents, and he still wasn't able to get out of them, get them out of there in 6 or 8 rounds. So it doesn't appear to be a particularly dangerous puncher or anything like that. At cruiserweight, much less heavyweight. So let me know what you guys think in the comment section below. Daniel Dubois versus this Ricardo Snijers guy. Are you as disappointed as I am that he's no longer fighting Erik Pfeiffer? Do you believe what Erik Pfeiffer's promoter said, that Dubois' team got cold feet because they thought that maybe, Pfeiffer presented a serious danger that could potentially derail the Joyce fight? Look, if Pfeiffer was a big money fight for Daniel Dubois, I've got no doubt that he would be happy to go ahead with that fight. If Dubois didn't have a bigger fight lined up after it, I've got no doubt they'd be happy to go ahead with it. I see no reason why Dubois would be scared of the guy. But in a situation like this, where there's a bigger fight after this one, I can understand why it might be true what Erik Pfeiffer's promoter's saying. I can see where the motive would be. Yeah? Again, I'm not taking his side. I'm not saying he's right. He could be lying. It could be Frank Warren who's in the right. I don't know. Let me know what you guys think in the comment section below. It's happening. I'm out.
Join me on Patreon. I upload a minimum of 2 podcasts every single week, covering a wide variety of controversial topics, as well as live stream Q&A sessions. Take a look on screen right now at some of the podcasts I've produced so far. For just $3 a month, the equivalent of about £2 a month, you get access to all my new podcasts and my entire back catalogue of past podcasts, including my popular Confessions of a Nightclub Bouncer series. You can listen on your computer or on your smartphone or tablet by downloading the Patreon app from the Google Play Store or the App Store for free. The Patreon app also allows you to download each podcast in MP3. For less than the price of a cup of coffee, you get access to dozens of hours of exclusive content. It's easy to sign up, there's no contract, and you can cancel at any time. So come and join our community of free and critical thinkers by signing up with me here on Patreon today.